There we go. Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Kageyama, and I'd like to welcome everyone here to Be Your Own Hero. Hope everybody is having a great week. I am doing absolutely fantastic. I just had an appointment today. I got some blood work done, and so I'll be getting results here probably next week. So I will update everybody then. But the weather here in Southern California is just absolutely pristine. It is beautiful. And I've been out walking. I've been walking quite a bit up and down hills and making progress. And so I'm absolutely thrilled and happy to be here. And I'm also thrilled and happy to have my guest, and his name is Ashok Bhattacharya, and he's just a wonderful, wonderful person, and I'd like to introduce Ashok at this time. Ashok, please tell us a little bit about yourself, and let's kick off this interview.
Well, first of all, Mark, I want to thank you because we've been kind of hanging out on the Tim Stone show. And then I watched your episode. And then some while after that, I was on the show myself. And I've always looked to you for the sheer significance and warmth and power and the optimism that you're providing this community of people who are really reaching out and I think need this kind of support. And my story really starts in England when I was a kid growing up. I spent a lot of time in a hospital with an illness myself. So for about 2 years, I had a bunch of machinery on my legs. And I was really, really interested in playing soccer as a child. And because I had all this stuff on my legs, I was stuck playing with the girls all day long. But I realized that girls are way more in tune with empathy. They're way more in tune with their feelings and their emotions. And I thought, this is really cool. Talking to the girls is really cool. I got really interested in how people talk to convey their stories and their feelings. And that has never, never left me. So by the time I got to be in my later teens, I worked in psychiatric hospitals. Both of my parents worked in psychiatric hospitals. My mother was one of the first art therapists in Canada back in the 70s. My father worked as a psychiatrist as well. And I decided to get into med school in 1980 and became a psychiatrist by 1989. And ever since then, I've been talking to people, listening to their powerful stories and doing my very best to be there for them in the good moments, but more importantly, in the difficult moments.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And one of the things, and I'd like to share this with everybody, is what an incredible attitude and mindset that you promote, and and I really, really resonate with that. So I really appreciate that about you, Ashok. And whereabouts are you doing this interview from? Canada?
Right now, I'm in a little town outside of Toronto, Canada, in Ontario. It was 32 degrees the other day, so we're catching up to California temperatures. And it's a very pleasant little town. It reminds me a little bit of the town I grew up in England. So I've always lived in similar places around the world that have kind of a heart-centered memory for where I feel comfortable. And this town is close enough to the city to have some of the amenities that are available there, but far enough away to feel like there's a bit of countryside feeling as well. So I can go out my bike rides and be in the country very, very quickly and enjoy that as well.
Oh, that's awesome. Very, very good. Uh, as you had mentioned, we had met on Tim Soane's show, Showing Up Perspectives on Cancer, and
Mhm.
both you and I were interviewed on his live stream. And one of the things that resonated with me about your interview on that show was your mother and your just incredible compassion uh, and the incredible story that she went through. If you could talk about that and share that with everybody, I'd appreciate it.
Well, my mom was an interesting character. She was born in England in 1934. She spent the time in during World War II, briefly hospitalized, watching the Battle of Britain from a hospital on a hill, and watching the Spitfires and Messerschmitts fight basically for her hometown. And she was only just a little child. So what a frightening image for that. But my mom was a very artistic person. And when she came to Canada, she immediately thought that she would become an art therapist. There's really no cancer history in her family. And sadly, in those days, a lot of the chemicals that were used in art supplies were extremely carcinogenic, especially some of the cadmium containing paints. Nowadays, a lot of artists who use these oil-based paints wear gloves and masks. And in those days, my mom just didn't. So I'm not saying that's why she got her cancer. She started off with breast cancer, but I'm pretty sure that the exposure to that might have accelerated her cancer story. So she got cancer when I was 18, and she was just 44 years of age. And she lived for 12 years, Mark. And you might say that was good, or that was a long time, but it was very difficult for me personally because we were very close. And of course, a few years after she got cancer, I became a doctor. So I really began to understand and appreciate the prognosis. And my mom's prognosis was very bad from the very start. She essentially had a disseminated disease at the beginning of her diagnosis. So she had to have some very egregious and painful procedures that were ultimately, on reflection, more palliative than curative going through. But she had good chunks. I mean, like 3 to 4 year times of being relatively free of having to go to doctors, having to have blood tests every couple of weeks, and being able to enjoy life. And what happened, you know, my mom was very British. That's a very British attitude, very prudish and very upper lip stiff kind of a person. Her cancer completely changed her. She became much more outgoing. She loved to laugh and loved music, she just really came out of that shell. It's almost like her tumor gave birth to another side of her personality that we hadn't seen before. And we just, she and I were, again, we were very close. We could just as well been brother and sister as mother and son. And because of her illness and how vulnerable it made her, there was a bit of a role reversal, Mark, where I became the caretaker and she was, well, at times very weak. And as you know, and many people who have suffered with cancer, there are moments that are, especially with a parent, that you'd never expect to have to be part of. Issues of incontinence and these kind of things that can sometimes happen. She was a very proud British woman, of course, and we had many private moments that were difficult for us. But I think that really strengthened our respect and love for each other at the same time.
So so you were her caretaker, so you were in England or in Canada at that time?
Yeah, we came to Canada in 1968. And so my mom got her cancer in 1978, so almost exactly 10 years after we got to Canada. And you know, in those days, the treatments were not as sophisticated, or as the operations were bigger and longer, and the recovery was more complex for her as well. So yeah, I was that. You know, there are other children in our family, but I was that kid that I guess I had that empathy and that compassion and that certainly that love for my mother. So I probably spent a little bit more time with her, just making sure that some of her private thoughts and needs were being looked after as well as the obvious ones. I mean, many times she just needed some company. She had a great social life, but I think when her cancer happened, she had a bit of a double life because she didn't feel comfortable sharing all of her story with all of her friends, and I think that was that wedge got a bit wider as we continued through her story together. And so my mom was she was a strong character, but towards the end she got very frightened. I mean, she was only 56 when she passed, Mark. And she was very scared and frightened towards the end, towards the last number of years. So a lot of our conversations were very existential about life and the things that she'd seen so far and what she was going to be missing out on. There were lots of tears and lots of hugging and lots of sadness, but at the same time, I got much closer to her. And we were at a restaurant together, actually. And this is one of these roadhouse restaurants where they have butcher paper on the tables. And I ripped a little piece of the butcher paper and wrote a little note and said, just hold on to this. And after she passed away, I was going through her purse and I saw this little piece of paper in the corner. I opened it up and I'd forgotten about this piece of paper and opened it up. The paper said, I will always be there for you, Mom. And she'd kept it in her purse all those years.
Oh man, that is awesome. That is just
Yeah, that still
beautiful.
makes me well up a bit as I talk about it, because it was who we were to each other. It was a powerful moment for me. But at the same time, what I do when I lose someone, especially to cancer, they go in my heart, Mark. They live in my heart. So I've got all these people now living in my heart that I've lost. And one of my mantras to myself is I have to live more now because I'm living for them too.
Oh, that's beautiful. That is just awesome. You know, I think what's so interesting as to what you're saying, I know exactly what you're saying because that's the exact attitude that I've taken, which I didn't have prior to cancer. I mean, I consider myself, um, and this may sound crazy, but I consider myself blessed beyond belief to um, not to necessarily have gotten the disease because I don't think anybody likes cancer, but cancer has changed my life completely in so many different ways. And it's one of the things I talk about is not sleepwalking through life. That's what I was doing. I was sleepwalking through life. I was just waking up and just letting the day um, handle me instead of me handling my day. And now it's totally different. I am just so happy about and I appreciate everything. And for instance, your willingness to come on my interview today means so much. Little things like that, people giving their time. Time is just such a beautiful thing that, um, I hope more people uh, can appreciate. Uh, as we go along, because time is the most precious commodity that we have. We can't replace it. We can't, once it's gone, it's gone. So make the absolute most of the time that we have on here on earth because uh, this life is so beautiful. Look at nature. Look when you go outside your door, you look up at the sky, the blue sky, and the trees with the green leaves, and right now it's everything's blooming and the flowers blooming and so I didn't appreciate those things like I do now. When I was really sick, I couldn't leave my room for I don't know about 2.5 months, and so I was confined to my room. And so when I actually opened my front door for the first time in weeks and weeks and weeks, and I looked outside, and it was different. It was different. I I think that was the time for the first time I really opened my eyes and realized what was in front of me. And so, yes, what you're saying here, uh, it is just so beautiful. With your mom, and I want to hear more about your mom and your story with your mom because it's so wonderful to hear. Uh, can you expand some more on that?
Well, I want to amplify on just something that you just said, Mark, that I think has become my mantra for many, many years, especially because of essentially starting at 18 to realize that I was going to lose my mother any month, and I lost her when I was 30. So that's 12 years of contemplating sort of life and the meaning of life and existentialism questions. So, and I don't mean to be mean to your audience, but a lot of people are waiting for something to happen. And my mantra is be the happen that happens to your life. Don't wait for something to happen. Make something happen. You be that happen. You don't have to make something happen every day. But if you have an attitude of being contributory to your life, or even more beautifully to somebody else's life in a positive way, to me that's my high, is really to help people and make people feel a little better from where they were before. That's what gets me going. Then you're happening to the world around you. And one of my lines is, don't wait for Tuma to change your attitude, because it does. Every client I've ever had who was difficult, and if they got cancer during therapy, I'm almost mad. Like, you mean you had to get cancer to get all this amazing insights about the value of life and the quality of the experience around you and what you can do to help yourself and help the people around you? My mom was always a kind person, and she was young, and I'm biased, of course, she was my mom, but she was quite beautiful and youthful looking, and she was very kind. And so they asked her when she was really quite full of cancer, would you be the role model to go into the hospitals to newly diagnosed women with breast cancer to say, look, it's okay, you can look like me? And so she would go into the hospital and be that person that would calm and soothe newly diagnosed women who'd had breast cancer, just to really to calm them and soothe them. And she did that even when she was dying, Mark.
Wow.
And I never forget how important it was for her to inspire others who probably were going to have a better prognosis. They might become cancer free within a few operations and some treatment, when she wasn't going to get a better diagnosis or prognosis. And that's what really got me thinking about the power of inspiring somebody else, even if you don't have the same level of hope for yourself. I think that's a powerful thing. And I'm old. I'm 62 now. I've been at the rodeo for a while, and I think I don't have a lot of time left, but I got enough time to make a difference. And that's why I'm just that's why I jumped on LinkedIn. Because I think it's such an opportunity to get a message out to a bigger audience. My mom was an artist, and not only did she teach art, but I have my house is full of, both of my parents were artists of her art too. So we've got lots of mementos as to how she celebrated the love of life, the love of color, the love of design, the love of seeing something and being able to reproduce it and interpret in her own eyes. And I think that was a wonderful gift that she had, that she continues to share with us with her art.
So, as your mom is going through this cancer journey, um, how was it for you as far as dealing with um, the, this is your mom, and I'm going to do everything I can to help her get better, but at the same time, fighting all the things that cancer brings. Um, what was going through your mind as she was getting worse? I know it's a feeling of helplessness, but what was your mindset at that time?
Well, Mark, I know you don't mean to cry, and so I don't mean to bring the audience into too much personal history that might be upsetting to them, but my family was in chaos at that time. My parents had divorced. There was lots of other people now hanging around. There were strangers. There was people that my parents were seeing, of course. There were new romances, new marriages. The siblings were all splintered as well. So it was a very messy, chaotic time. I was also going through a breakup with a relationship that I was going in at the time. And I was in med school and playing in a full-time rock band as well
Wow.
to pay my bills, which I did. So I think the honest answer is I kind of shut down, Mark. I got burnt out. I just had to focus on getting through school, of course, helping my mom as much as I could. But in those days, I don't think anyone in my class knew, for example, anyone at the medical school knew that my mom was dying of cancer.
Mm,
I wasn't sharing that with anybody.
hmm
And because of the mess and chaos that was going in my family, a lot of people just kind of walked away. And so it became an extremely isolating and alienating and lonely experience. And, I'm a reasonably resilient person, but I had to learn how to share, Mark.
Mm-hmm.
I had to learn how to trust to share. I went through a long period of time when I wasn't a cool dude and I was just hiding all my stuff, acting out in ways that I'm not very proud of, dating too many women, that kind of thing. I was never into drugs or alcohol. That's not where the story is going. But I think I was selfishly preoccupied with my need to hide my feelings. And I'd look back on it now and I think, wow, I should have got some help. I definitely should have got some therapy at that time. Didn't do anything like that. And I just kind of stuffed and stuffed and stuffed until I just um, kind of got through and managed to get to the other side. So it's not a good answer, but it's the honest answer, Mark. I had to learn how to realize that I need to reach out. And I think once I began to reach out when I was much older and tell my story when I was much older, that's when I could kind of retroactively begin to heal some of those experiences I went through.
So you had to learn from your previous experience, and I know it's completely influenced the way you are as a doctor now. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would think the main reason that I'm a doctor is to help with human suffering. Because I think that human suffering isn't always connected to um, a disease that we all know about. It's connected to the person's expectations changing because of that disease. It's connected to their social world changing because of that disease. It's connected to their soul and their spirit changing because of that connection to that disease. So when I work with someone who hasn't any illness, I find out all the other things that are going on with them, their social life, their emotional life, their spiritual life, and what's happening with them in their mental life, because everything changes. If you take a spider web and clip one strand, the shape of the web changes.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, cancer is a lot more than one strand being cut in a spider web. So the whole thing is now disfigured in a different way. And if I just look at those couple of broken strands, I'm missing out on the big picture of what that person's going through. I want to know as much as I can possibly know to help that person with what they're going through from kind of an everything perspective. I call it a soul perspective. And I've been that way since I started medicine. And not to upset any of my teachers out there, but I wasn't trained to be that way. I was trained to diagnose and treat disease, and which I do, and I'm quite interested in doing that. But I think there's a whole lot more to human suffering than the disease that somebody has, Mark.
I mean, I could just feel your the compassion that you have for people, and that is such a beautiful thing because that's one of the things that is lacking in today's world. So to hear you say this, it just means so much because I am all about helping to make this world a better place, and I my hats off to you because I could see that that's what you do, and that's what's important to you.
Well, unfortunately, I had lots of experience going into doctors' offices with my mother to help her understand what she was being told and to have her treatment solutions or options to go through those with her. And so I kind of went along to her appointments, and the drive home was mostly celebratory ones, but sometimes very very gray ones, and not much conversation going on in the car on the way back. But what I noted, Mark, was the experience in the doctor's office. What were their staff like? What was the nurses like? What were their secretaries like? What was the doctor themselves like? Was he and she personable? Did they call my mother by her name? Did they call her by her disease? How did they make her feel? Did they ask any questions besides her symptoms? And again, not to bash my colleagues, but most didn't.
Mm-hmm.
They were interested in making the visit, fairly brief and quite specific to the illness at hand. And it was over pretty quickly, and some of it was hard to remember because you were just in a utter state of shock. and you were just kind of side blinded by this. And I always thought, wow, there has to be a better way to do this. There has to be a way to deliver difficult messages or even good messages. Because sometimes you tell someone who has a cancer diagnosis, hey, you're cancer free. They don't hear you, right? They're so attuned to and ready for something. And that needs help too. You need to help people with good news as well. Um, but I was exposed to a lot of that in my training, but also especially as a chaperone to my mom's cancer over a 12-year period, Mark. And so many appointments over that time. And she had lots of good doctors. There were lots of good experiences too. But unfortunately, it's the ones that weren't good that you remember. Mm-hmm. The ones when I was saying to myself, note to self, when I become a doctor, don't do that. Mm-hmm. Or when I become a doctor, make sure you make the person feel at ease. Make sure you ask them, do you have any questions? And make sure, for heaven's sake, when you speak to them in terms they can understand. Because I think Dr. Goop, which is sometimes what we talk, it's great to impress each other, but it doesn't help people who are scared and frightened, who just want to know either, what's the news and what are our next steps? And, I'm a doctor, but I only ever speak to my clients in words that we both understand. And I think that it's great to have technical knowledge and technical terms, but they're invented for doctors to speak to doctors, not to speak to their patients.
What would you do if you were in charge of a medical system, say, for instance, in Canada? How would you change that? What would you do to implement change?
Well, I think the most important word that summarizes my approach to medicine is the word empathy. And all empathy really means is to investigate the experience of somebody else. It's really quite simple. It starts with asking the question, how are you? How do you feel? What does it feel like being you? What are your worries and concerns? And then it's about listening to their answer. Because people usually, if you ask the question nicely and look like you're interested in the answer, will tell you quite a lot of stuff. And empathy is not putting yourself in their shoes. Empathy is actually kind of putting yourself aside, imagining them in their shoes. So I think that's a really key part of it. I think a lot of people who become doctors, I know this because my medical school class was full of doctors, and we all had started at the same time. And I never heard the word empathy till I got out of psychiatry. It wasn't really talked about in 10 years of training. It wasn't talked about. That's quite astounding. But I think if a doctor understands what someone's going through from the human perspective, that might inform them just a little bit. And, when I go to a restaurant and someone says, and I order, let's say I order a steak, and they ask me quite specifically how I want it done. Why don't we do that in medicine? Why don't we ask someone, how do you want your care to go? How do you want your steak done? What kind of sauce? Do you want ranch on that or blue cheese? Do you want sweet potato fries? It's a simple thing, but to me, medicine has a menu, and that menu should make the customer satisfied. And the customer happens to have an illness, and they're not there to eat; they're there to get treated. But at the same time, I think I would train, if I was involved in that kind of system, I would train empathy. And I would make empathy something, part of the training that would be an absolute thing. People don't have to be empathy experts. They just have to, it's the same thing with driving. Everyone needs to learn how to drive a car if they want to drive a car. You don't have to be an expert driver. You just know how to drive properly. And empathy is entirely teachable. Once people think empathically, they start to put their mind into the person in front of them. What does this person need? How can I make this person's experience? Maybe I can't cure them, but I can make the experience more manageable and comfortable for them and their family. So, Mark, that's a long answer, but that's my answer.
Oh, I love that. I absolutely love that. We're coming up on the time for our session here, and I don't want to keep you forever. We could talk for hours and hours and hours, as we've said before. So, for this particular interview, what are your final thoughts, Ashok?
Well, I have lots of final thoughts, but I also want to say that if you ever want to have me back, we can
I
do another
do.
one
I
on the
definitely
road
do.
because I don't think we finished our conversation today. My final thought is look for a way that you can be hopeful to yourself and others. I'm an optimistic person, but I'm also a realistic person. And I think human beings, one of the things that really make us human is the capacity for hope. We can be in difficult situations. We can be faced with very difficult life situations, including difficult diseases like cancer. And because we have hope, we've been able to cure so many cancers now. Because we have hope, we've been able to tell someone who has a new diagnosis, there's a good chance we can beat this and be true about that. But also, as you know better than I do, cancer by itself isn't just the only issue when someone has cancer. It's their mood, it's their social life, it's their spirit, it's their soul, it's everything around that. And I think if we know someone is going through that experience, just show up, just turn up. You just need to bring us a deck of cards and play cards with them. You don't have to talk too much about all their misery and suffering. Just show up. Be a human with the human that is still alive. They're not dead. They're still alive, and they want to live as much as possible.
You know, it's interesting, and I'm glad that you brought that up. It is the aspect of when somebody first hears that you have cancer. Oh, I have cancer, and the immediate reaction is silence, and people are trying to process that in their mind and what they're going to say, and invariably they say, "Oh, I'm so sorry." That's the first thing that comes out of their mind because that's what they've been taught to do. And I have friends that have reached out to me, and in fact, my accountant. I called up my accountant, and he was like, "How you doing?" And I said, "I'm doing great." And he said, "You're alive." And I said, "Yes, I'm alive." And so that's a very interesting thing. We could talk in another interview about that, but um,
Yeah.
I mean, there's just so much to cancer. It is so complex, and there's so many unknowns for most people. And you've had direct and have direct contact with cancer through your patients and through your family and people that you've known. And you know, cancer for me, this cancer world of people, and there's more and more avenues for patients and survivors to connect with social media, and that's one of the things that we do on Thursdays is we have uh, a room on Clubhouse. I don't know if you're familiar with the Clubhouse app. We have a room called Cancer Conquering Community, and it's at on every Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 o'clock Pacific, and we have a group of people. We come together. We have uh, patients, survivors, doctors, nurses, caretakers. Everybody, and it's a beautiful thing. I really look forward to it every week, and just to share. And I always what's really fascinating to me is uh, I open up the room and I don't know. We have a topic that we put up, and I don't know what is going to happen in the room that particular day. But before going in, I know it's going to be good. I just know it. And it never surprises me. And the thing that blows me away is the journey that we go on every week. It's something happens that we did not expect, and people opening up and sharing, and it's basically a fraternity that is there and that's available for everyone, absolutely everyone, and people. That's a very important thing to reach out and connect with people who have like experiences or have experiences that can help another person in their life. And so that's one of the things that we do. And I don't know if you had heard that, but we would absolutely love to have you if you have the time to come. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to thank you, Ashok, for everything that you shared with us. It's just brilliant. And you share openly, and you share your experiences. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart. And we are definitely going to have a continuation of this conversation because there's so much that we need to explore and share. And so thank you so much for your time.
Mark, it was a pleasure to have this conversation with you. I know this will not be our last one.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, what I'd like to do at this time is I'd like to thank everyone for joining us here at To Be Your Own Hero, and come and join Ashok and I, help us to uh, make the world a better place. Let's have more people connecting with a positive mindset. And when we all come together like this, we get stronger. Alone, we can only do so much. But as we come together and we share these experiences and help each other, that's how this community keeps growing and is building. And we're creating a movement. And, people uh, should should join us because it's really really beautiful because it's something I think everybody needs. And so I thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I thank everyone else out there watching, um, and who come every week. And I appreciate the comments and the support tremendously. And so be sure to take advantage of every single day, every single hour, every single minute, and every single breath because life is beautiful. Thank you so. Oh, I love that. Look at that. I love that, Ashok. Thank you so much. And we will see you next time on To Be Your Own Hero. Take care and have a fantastic week.